Well, I was adopted at 2, so the story that I've been told, according to my family, was that I was found and put into an orphanage when I was 1 years old. And my parents wanted to adopt a child and couldn't actually adopt locally, I should say domestically, because they already had 4 healthy children, and their options were either adopt a handicapped child or go international. So they had actually found a news article for an agency that was looking to, to help adopt children. And my folks basically picked me out of an array of other children, and they wanted a girl. And after a while, apparently they were able to get the adoption put through fairly quickly. And by let's see here, I arrived to Anchorage, Alaska on December the 27th, 1960, and then landed in Torrance, California, where, my family, my new family, basically met me at the airport. And so that's the story I know. I don't really have I don't have any recollection at all as to, anything along those lines, being in the orphanage. I'm sure that many of my current day type things, probably stem from me being being in the orphanage for probably about a year. So that's about all I really remember, and the stories that have been told to me by my folks and my eldest brothers. I have 4 older brothers, and after I was adopted, my folks had 2 more boys. So I grew up in a family of 6 brothers. We were kind of a musical family. My 3 oldest brothers are quite a few years older than me. So, let's see here. My eldest brother now is probably close to his 70s. So I can remember things like actually having a sister-in-law by the time I was in the 3rd grade. I had a nephew by the time I was in the 4th grade. So, we had the 3 eldest brothers, and then I have one brother that's just 1 year older than me. And then my 2 younger brothers, one that's a year younger than I am, and another one that is 4 years younger than me. So, fairly large family, working family. My dad was a teacher by trade, but then became a welder. We moved back and forth between Southwest Missouri and California. Apparently, my mother couldn't quite figure out if she wanted to be a big city girl or, or a country girl. So, a lot of movement between those 2 particular parts of the state. My mother never worked, so I always just remember her just constantly raising children. Like I said, my dad is what I would consider a blue-collar worker, being a welder. My dad was an elder in the Reorganized Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, so what a lot of people would consider Mormons, but teachings were more of the Joseph Smith following versus the Brigham Young following. And so pretty religious, so to speak. And it was kind of interesting because I think my mom really wanted a girly girl, and she didn't quite get one. I was I really liked being a tomboy more than anything else. I didn't like wearing, frilly dresses, and, I wanted to, be out there with, the boys playing sports and, things like that. And although my mom did try her best to turn me into a girl, lots of dresses, charm school, so I learned how to be a lady and learned pretty much everything there was to being a housewife, so to speak, a housewife and a mother. Interesting enough, my mother wanted my younger brothers and I to be kind of in the spotlight of things. So we tap danced. So from the time I was probably 3rd grade until well into my early teens, we were a tap dancing team. Went around the country tap dancing with a particular studio. And me being Korean, became part of what they called the International Children's Choir. So it was, representatives from many different countries, and I represented South Korea. And looking back, my mom actually saw pictures of hanboks and actually made one for me when I was little. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. And yeah, I had the hanbok and a sash that said South Korea. And, I sang in a choir as well growing up. And, high school, pretty much normal girl stuff, being in high school, things like that. I found it interesting growing up with all white, later as I got older, just kind of thinking through, what it was like. I kind of considered myself a white person, but didn't really see that. So I think I grew up with identity crisis just like I think most teenagers do. And, as I'm finding out now, a lot of Asian adoptees are growing up, with that kind of an identity crisis of who they are. It was kind of like stuck in between two worlds. You grow up in all white neighborhoods, but yet you're Asian. So there was a lot of things of the fact that people had stereotypes about Asians, but I had no real understanding of what that meant. My parents, I don't think, really prepared me for, the name calling, the where are you really from type questions. They just didn't prepare me. I remember one time being in high school, and I actually I had a picture taken with a male friend. He had a big crush on me, and he happened to be from South America. And my mom's comment to me was, you should be dating your own kind. And I kind of felt at that time that was a very odd question for me. So, of course, being a kind of a rebellious teenager a little bit, not a whole lot, but just a little bit. And just kind of looking at her going, well, there are no Koreans where I go to school, Mom. And she goes, well, you know what I mean. And I said, I don't know what you mean. So I think that was probably the first time I really felt like growing up in an all-Caucasian family, in an all-Caucasian, primarily, neighborhoods, suddenly feeling like I didn't really belong. So the identity crisis hit me pretty hard in my late teens as I was getting ready to, leave high school and things like that. So it was a very strange time for me. When I look back on it, I go, well, the normal route for teenagers is to go through identity crisis, trying on different things. Who am I? I think being in a multiracial family, there's a different aspect to that identity crisis because you don't really feel like you belong in either world. I don't speak Korean. I don't cook Korean food. I don't hardly know anything about my Korean origins except for what I read in the books. Never even met a Korean person before until I was being an adult. So yeah, the identity crisis was just trying to figure out how do I belong in this world. How do I acclimate to being an Asian person, but yet with, growing up culturally Caucasian. So just very confusing to me, at the time. And, even growing up as I got older, some of that identity still comes across, but I think I've come to a little bit better terms with it. The idea that I can be whoever I want to be. I can be of both worlds, so to speak. And in a weird way, the third, which is from a cultural perspective. So I could be, culturally, Midwestern, and still kind of understand what it's like to be culturally Asian, and immersing myself a little bit into the Asian culture and learning what I can about it as best as I can. I knew that one of the ways for me to kind of break the ties with my parents was to join the military. Is a pretty good tie sever, right? Cut those apron strings. You've got to serve your time. And I wound up taking on a role that was non-female. So I became a mechanic, airplane mechanic at that. And of course, I started running into the same type of stereotypes. Girls can't be mechanics because girls are tiny. Girls aren't strong. My mind was like, well, what's there to be a mechanic, number one? And then I would run into things of, well, you're small. And it's like, yeah, okay. So, but there are things that I can do that a guy can't do. I would figure out ways around how to overcome some of the shortcomings I might have for being a small, petite female. And then I started running into, again, the stereotypes. I'm Asian. would run into things like, the name calling. By this time, being a teenager and almost into my adulthood, I kind of already knew what those names were, and I kind of understood why. And again, working primarily in all white. So, if I think about the whole military idea was, it actually turned out to be a very good thing for me because it allowed me to become a very independent individual. It allowed me to stretch what I don't think I was able to do with my parents because they kind of kept me in a very small box, so to speak, with their idea of what a female should be. So when I relate that back to kind of being Asian, it really is no different, So then I ran into this whole idea of, well, what is identity? Is my identity from being a woman? Is my identity from being an Asian? Living in a white world, living in a man's world. So, you kind of sort of pile on some of this extra thought process about the identity, the place as a woman, your place as an Asian woman in society, and what does that really mean? I kind of feel like I broke an awful lot of those rules. So I had always been kind of curious about Korean adoptees. So I remember when being on the internet was starting to become a very commonplace, and Yahoo groups was probably the first more, social media-ish, where just random groups of people would gather collectively because of something that they have in common. And so that's probably not, that is the first time I've ever encountered Korean adoptees in general. And I had known about Korean adoptees because, I had a little bit exposure, not realizing it when I was young, to Holt. Even though I was not adopted through Holt, they had wrote a book, and my parents, had me read through the book, and I just kind of, didn't really remember it until I was much older. So this was probably in the 80s, because that's kind of related to the age of my children. I do a lot of relating according to the ages of my kids. So this was probably in the 80s when I started, kind of reaching out and searching for other Korean adoptees. And that's how I found some Yahoo groups out there. And I joined them. After a while, though, I got a little, not disappointed, but, just kind of more annoyed, because it was like all I ever heard on those groups was, what I would call the woe is me syndrome, the victim, I'm the victim, and this is who I am, because I was adopted, or because I had bad American parents, or whatever the case may be. And I got just a little annoyed, and I dropped all those groups. So we're going to fast forward into, the 21st century, Facebook, LinkedIn. I got hooked up into a large national Asian organization. And then that's when I started actually meeting Korean adoptees. And it was just like this weird revelation of, oh my God, you're a Korean adoptee too? And then I kind of I happened to randomly find a Facebook group because of an acquaintance of mine from Washington, D.C. that I didn't know was a Korean adoptee. He didn't know I was a Korean adoptee, and I saw him post something on Facebook. And then all of a sudden, this huge Facebook group, almost overwhelming me, tons of different Facebook groups out there for Korean adoptees. Where I am today, so I'm in my mid-50s, is definitely much different, and my look on life and being an adoptee is much different than when I was in my early 20s. So, if we go back, right, I became a parent at 19, totally by accident. It was not planned. I wound up not being able to finish a military career, much to my disappointment. I had to choose. It was either military or family, so I chose family. Divorced in my early 20s, single parent pretty much all the way through. And I would have to say that work probably, the idea of not wanting to be raising my kids in a disadvantaged world, single parent, 2 children, no college education, really kind of set in my mind that I needed to do something different. And I worked very, very hard at what I currently do with my job. I've actually been with the same company now for more than 30 years. I became a grandparent at a very young age, a lot younger than I would have wanted to, right? And but and meeting my husband actually made a lot of changes. The man that's outside right now has been by my side for 19 years now. I thought it was actually only 17 the other day we were talking about, and it's like, oh, it's been 19 years. Wow. I know I look forward to retirement, which isn't a whole long ways away. I figured it out. It's like 7 more years, and if I can, manage to stay with this particular project, I'll be able to retire from this company, and then I kind of go, yeah, but I could see like me not continuing to work. What would be my second career? I don't know yet. There are times where I'm kind of sad because I go, I hear about people going back to and searching for their families, and I go, I have no desire to do that, and I kind of know why. I don't want that second hurt. What if they really did give me up because they really didn't want me? Can my heart kind of and my soul kind of take that? I don't think it could. I really don't. Could I have had better parents? Couldn't we all? I certainly didn't have the worst parents, and I probably certainly didn't have the best parents. Did being adopted shape me? Probably to a certain extent. I have my own, what I would consider my own demons from being an adopted child. There are times where, certain types of things pop back. I get triggered to do, and it's always not a very pretty thing, but I kind of deal with them. So sometimes from a psychological perspective, there's a lot of hurt there, and I think they're kind of deep-seated. And then when I kind of get out of that little bit of a funk, it's like I have lots of things. It's like, my life could have been worse. I could have been with a worse family. The old tales of, you could have been left an orphan out on the street and never been adopted could have happened to me. I try my best not to always think about the what ifs, because, they don't really do you much good at all. Adoption has shaped me to who I am today. But at the same time, it's like no different than anybody else out there in their life situation. It's kind of like, you're handed a set of cards. You don't know what's going to be given to you next, and you figure out the best possible hand you can by looking at what you've got and making the best of it. This is actually kind of a big thing for me to do this, to talk so openly and, at such length. It's always been very small, piecemeal type, let a few things, in at a time. Meeting other Korean adoptees, though, has been very fascinating to me because it's like I said earlier, we all started at the same place, but we're all ending in different places. So I'm finding it fascinating just to talk to different people, either, in very, very small groups, to kind of go, hear their stories and the things that they grew up with, finding that there's lots of commonality, but just like anything else, there's also lots of differences and different perspectives. So with my family today, I have my mother has passed, so she's been passed for quite a few years. I've got 5 of my brothers still living. We do our best to get together every Thanksgiving, but what I find is that it's what I would consider very surface. We're not distant, but we're not close. There are times where, I can see where we are, we have those feelings for each other, but we just don't really communicate. We're not the communicating type. My husband sees that a lot, that I'm not really a big communicating type person.